To MSUA's Game Changers Live, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends, new technologies, and share what you need to know about the future of mobile satellite communications. I am your host for today, Lisa Dreyer, and I am really excited to introduce our guest for today, Brad Grady. He is the research director at NSR and Analysys Mason Company. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Welcome to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe you can start by just giving us a little bit of background on NSR and yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So NSR is a satellite research consultancy focused on kind of the space markets. We're part of a larger company called Analysys Mason that does market research and consulting in the TMT space. So we have 17 offices all over the world. I think there's about 500 of us now. I sit in NSR, which you may know as Northern Sky Research, but we focus and live, eat, breathe, die space every day. So my remit is on the things that move market. So if it's a plane, train, an automobile, if a government owns it, that's research that comes out of my area. I also focus in on kind of the state of government spending and kind of our general research on kind of the global space economy. So how big is this entire market that we're talking about? Where's it going? Where's that direction? Kind of stacking up all of our research into one big piece. So it's really exciting to be here today.
Great, great, great. Well, thank you for that background. I'd really like to talk a little bit about just from a high level, what are the most important roles that the satellite industry has to play in the future of mobile connectivity?
Yeah, I think this is a really great question. And I kind of frame it in the context of there will eventually be a time where we no longer make a differentiation that the connectivity is going through space, right? All of us are working really hard in this industry to make space less weird, reduce the friction, decrease the barriers of access, and make it simple, easy, and ubiquitous to have connectivity anywhere, either here on Earth or beyond, as we start thinking about Artemis and kind of going to the moon and Mars and elsewhere. So this is, I think, the construct that we think about here at NSR of when we start forecasting the market evolution in 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now, that we have these kind of ubiquitous connectivity services. In Analysys Mason, I think they like to call it like this digital connectivity fabric or digital fabric services, where you think about this network of networks where satellite plays a role in delivering Netflix and YouTube and Hulu and all these other kind of connectivity things that are really what people want, right? People don't want to be connected. People want email. And that's the role that satellite is playing in the future of, I'm no longer thinking about, does this satellite connectivity work? It's like, I don't know, can I access my email? Can I access Office 365? Can I do these things anywhere in the world whenever I want to do them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I am ready for that reality to be.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing that it doesn't take long to get outside of connectivity, even even here, right? So I'm in the Seattle area and we get out on the water in the Puget Sound and going up towards Canada. And yeah, you end up in a lot of places where the connectivity is just not very good or non-existent, which is
absolutely
kind of surprising, right?
Yeah, no, it's I think the inverse is also true of there's definitely places, especially in the maritime industry, where we see that you can get a surprising amount of connectivity far away from shore, but it's this like, oh, I didn't think this was going to work, and now you're happy it does.
Yeah.
And this is where we start to see these kind of, again, reducing the frictions and barriers of using space of, well, now you don't need to worry about it because you can have your this service or that service or this connection or that connection, and you're seamlessly roaming in between these best opportunity networks or these kinds of networks of best availability or reliability or throughput, whatever the metric of that you want to measure it against, right? Or doing least cost routing. Again, all of these new softwareification of the network connectivity layer that we're seeing being deployed across all sorts of remote use cases, I guess is the best word, are really increasing the ubiquity and access to space.
Right, which is amazing. So I think you're kind of alluding to some of the things that are going to be coming down the pike over the next, I don't know, 3, 5, maybe 10 years. What do you think will be some of the most significant changes that we'll see in, I guess, within the next 5 years, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe let's start with today, right? I mean, you think about it, SpaceX and Starlink, they're one of the largest, if not the largest satellite operator that is out there in the world today. They didn't exist a couple of years ago. Um,
Yeah.
and OneWeb is just getting to the end of their launch campaign, reaching full commercialization. Another one of these, huge LEO constellations of massive complexity that are changing the conversation of satellite connectivity. We look further down the line, there's Amazon Kuiper, and who knows what that's going to look like, because we all know Amazon, the terrestrial beast, or the hyperscaler, or the e-commerce giant, or the Echo product. What is that going to do for the space sector? And these are
Mhm.
all just new and interesting dimensions of how we think about it. On a practical level, we're really starting to think about going from specialist knowledge required to install and outfit an antenna, or go back to the maritime stuff of I need to get a parabolic dish and I need to have someone specialized in installing this terminal on my ship, plane, train, etc., to I'm going to have this thing that's like a pizza box, or just like a Wi-Fi modem or a Wi-Fi router that I have at my home, and I'm going to put it somewhere. It's going to just have access to the sky. I have an app that I download and it says, yeah, check, 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 good. um, and those are kind of the worlds that we're sort of seeing already today. So
Right.
if we think about 5 years from now, I mean, who knows, right? I mean, we're taking all of that stuff that's bleeding edge now becomes ubiquitous or more commonplace. Um, all the existing people in the value chain have to kind of compete with this. And so we're seeing this opportunity for this push pull of what are the role of the existing paradigms versus these new and emerging constructs that are coming out. And it's just a super interesting time to kind of be in this market, especially from a market research perspective, to try to slice and dice and figure out who has defendable tranches of unique value versus emerging disruptors and new technology that sounds really cool, but we've all kind of been there before. Like,
Right.
I've heard this story and it didn't work last time. Is this time
Mhm.
different? And if it is different, why different and how different?
Right.
Trying to
So
quantify all
speaking
that
of
stuff.
the new technology, one of the things that we keep hearing so much about is direct to device, right?
Oh
So
yes.
I can use my phone to connect to satellite. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, that's if I had a nickel, right? This is like one of these conversation points that we at NSR spend a lot of our time, especially now part of Analysys Mason, of this larger TMT group that's focused on kind of the telco world. So we have a lot of the telcos coming to us asking us these questions of, well, what role do you see this? How at risk is my legacy telecom business, my legacy mobility business for kind of cell phones? Or can I take advantage of this to do sort of new capex, opex trades to optimize my coverage and minimize my spend, because that's a big thing in kind of the macro market today.
Right.
But for space and for space players, I think we're starting to see two emerging market opportunities. Um, One is like, let's just try to penetrate a massive TAM, so penetrate a massive total addressable market opportunity. Smartphones happens to be one way. Let's figure out how we can do that quickly and kind of sustainably. The other one is, let's try to figure out these other use cases that continue to drive the business beyond just the early adopters. And
Mhm.
that's where I think we start to see these kind of the pencil meets the paper or meets the road, choose your example, of, are there sustainable, defendable tranches of value in those market opportunities of like the Apple SOS market, right? That's cool, but what's the business model behind that?
Right.
One area that we're starting to hear conversations out is the government and military markets. So if you are, so it's one of the areas I cover is government and military, but if you're, deployed out, out in the edge, or out, in a, area of low connectivity, can you take your government issued smartphone, connect to a constellation, get connectivity, or do you still need that dedicated kind of smart device or satellite device? And
Right.
what does that change the entire, ConOps of, government military connectivity networks? That's, I think, one area that we're starting to see more interest in.
Right, right. Have you looked at the ways they are actually, there's, I think, a few different technologies and or I guess supporting technologies that make it possible to go direct to device. Have you looked at those, and what do you think is, I guess, the most feasible or kind of growth, provides it in the most general way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of different ways that people are solving this, right? Some
Right.
is the custom chipset inside the device, so I need to either upgrade the device and get on this kind of terrestrial smartphone upgrade cycle, which is maybe okay, maybe not okay, depends on your worldview on that. Um, and that will unlock these new services and capabilities, and maybe I can use kind of COTS SAT services, right? Like I can just use commercial off the shelf. I don't really have to modify the satellite side of the network. Um, you know, okay. The other one is you assume that the ground or the consumer premise equipment or the smartphone is unchanged, and then you do massive things in space, which is, I guess, maybe more of a space solution, right? We tend
Hmm.
to we tend to think about the space segment side more than we think about kind of what's on the ground. And now you just say, oh well, the ground is fixed, so I'm just going to adopt what's there, and I'll do some special stuff in space. Um, I think the market and jury is still out as to which one of those kind of focus in and which one's the best one. And,
Yeah.
to be honest, that's not the area in kind of this greater conversation of space connectivity that I focus on it in
Yeah.
NSR. I have a colleague, Luke, who does a lot of this research of this direct to cell. Um, but it is an interesting paradigm of how do you, again, get to this reduce friction, increase ubiquity, make space less weird. And
Hmm.
sometimes you make space less weird by hiding the complexity in ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think you were at the satellite show. I think one of the big outcomes that I saw in Washington, last month was when you look from the outside of the ecosystem in, you should see simple. But when you're in the ecosystem and you look out, it's okay if that's complex.
Hmm.
But we just need to
Hmm.
remember that this is us looking in the mirrors, and it isn't a conversation that we need to take all the way to the end user, because the end user just wants their email. They
Right.
don't care about these massive reflectors in space, and it took so long to get there, and all this really geeky stuff that the two of us really do care about, but
Right.
customers don't.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, actually, speaking of that, what role do you think standards are going to play in this? There's been a ton of talk in the industry about moving more toward industry standards. There's some that believe that's a good thing. Others believe maybe it's not a good thing. What's your perspective?
Yeah, so this is another one of these interesting conversations to be tracking, right? And I have
Mhm.
enough, I'm starting to get enough gray hairs that I can own this conversation a little bit more. But the space industry has always viewed differentiation or difference as value, right? I am different, that creates value. I can defend my value because I am different. And now, as we're starting to see this move towards software, this move towards smartphone, we're starting to see the role economies of scale can play in building our businesses, right? And Starlink is another one of these things that kind of unlocked some of these thinking of, well, if I can do 1 million or 2 million or whatever number of dishes that they've shipped these days, that's a different paradigm. And standards helps you get there. So I think we're seeing a lot more companies embrace standards, be a participant in those standards bodies, because if you write the standard, you can help influence it and you can kind of trickle down into your own businesses. But this is the way that we're heading in the space sector, because we're getting dragged into the telco sector and the technology space that builds on standards, that focuses on standards, that embraces standards.
Mhm.
And so again, this make space less weird is adopt the standards and then compete on value and kind of other dimensions of value rather than technology differentiation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges today of delivering a really solid commercial satellite mobile experience?
Wow, I think funding, right?
Mhm.
So technology, the technology is there, I think, for a lot of these things, right? It's not outside the realm of real anymore to get kind of a cool flat panel antenna, install it on a ship or a plane, and do some other things, or launch a satellite up in space that delivers a transformative experience. For us, we're seeing a lot of challenges on the business side. And some of that comes in because customers or businesses don't know their market. They don't know the customer. They don't know the willingness to pay. And, that's a role that we tend to fill in a lot. Or they think that customers are willing to pay a whole lot when they're not really, right? They're like, I, I know that you can do this cool whiz bang feature, but that's not a monetizable feature of your network. That might just be the reason I picked you over somebody else at the same price.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kinds of challenges that I think the industry is starting to realize and starting to address, is getting over this kind of business funding finance. And we've seen that evolution, and standards is another one of these conversations that fills into this, right? Of we're going back from technology for technology's sake to technology for a business purpose, to solve a customer solution, right? So we're starting at the customer's problem, and we're building out this value chain. And part of the value chain has to be about the financing. It has to be about the business model. If you can't close a business case, you can't launch a satellite.
Yeah, no kidding. So actually that brings up a really good point, and that is going from the user perspective, right? So if I'm an enterprise user of satellite services, what are some of the criteria I should be taking into account as I'm looking for a partner or partners to work with on making sure I have connectivity kind of no matter where my business operates?
Yeah, no, I mean that's another one of these great questions. I mean, first of all, find a trusted advisor. I'd suggest NSR, and Analysys Mason company is one of them. But there's a lot of criteria that I think you really need to think about. And sometimes people get really caught up in is this KU or is this KA band? Because there's been a lot of conversations in the industry about the band is the thing that matters. Maybe even the orbit is the thing that matters.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first one is clearly define what your objectives are. If you're an airline and you know that 80% of your traffic is really streaming media, and it's mostly over this one area, and it mostly does this one route, or kind of this one thing, then that does kind of frame the technology solution a little bit. You don't need global ubiquitous connectivity, and if you're just streaming media, you maybe don't need low latency because there's not a lot of two-way traffic. So
Mm-hmm.
you can get away with other solutions that you maybe thought, oh, I must go here. And this is where we're starting to see this fact versus fiction of, I know these are all new shiny toys. Shiny toys are cool. I like toys too because I'm a tech head. But use the right tool for the job. And sometimes the shiny toy isn't the right tool for the job. Sometimes you just need to get kind of like the pickup truck to solve those problems. And that's where I think we are starting to see a lot of customers realizing. And this is why we're still seeing, and we continue to see, like in the aero market, a lot of the legacy is the wrong word, but a lot of the incumbent geo providers still winning contracts, right? Because, hey, the solution does work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it doesn't work 15 years from now, but for today, for now, for the next 3 years that your contract is going to be active, for the next 5 years, it's probably a pretty good solution.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. I think the other one is understand the roadmap, right? And built-in flexibility, because technology is changing so quickly in space. Even us that live, breathe, and die space every single day, we're still finding new things all the time. It's no longer I'm going to launch a satellite and sit on it for 5 or 10, 15 years, and it's going to basically be the same. It's, I'm going to do this, and it's very much more of a terrestrial roadmap. So when it comes down to have the lawyers in the room, make sure your contracts build in flexibility to adopt new technologies and ingest them into your enterprise network. And the other one is just software, right? So kind of embrace and adopt a software-defined architecture for your network. Understand how the service provider or satellite operator that you're working with is thinking about software, what tools and resources you will have access to, and whether or not that enables QoS, quality of service, quality of experience, if the metrics that you want to be measured against are going to be reported and available and all those other kinds of things. So I think between all those three kind of big dimensions, there's obviously, niche cases and things we can all, spend the rest of the day talking about. But those are the big things.
Sure. So, as you know, or may know, the Mobile Satellite Users Association celebrated our 30-year anniversary a year ago. So we're actually 31 years this year. And with that in mind, we've seen a lot of changes over the last 30 years. If you were to take out your crystal ball and predict what will happen in 30 years. So 30 years from now, what might happen? I know it's kind of crazy, but what would you predict?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. So today, and I live in Maryland, and it's take your kid to work day. So I asked my daughter this. She's 10 right now, or 11. She's 11 right now. So I asked her this, like, so when you're 40 something, what do you think about space? And it's like, that that's some weird geeky thing, Dad. Don't worry about it. But I think it gets to this. The fundamental assumption is we're not going to be thinking about space. It's just going to be a thing, right? It's going to be like getting in an airplane, like, oh, I got to go over to England. Okay, I just get on a plane, I go do it. Like, oh, I got to go to the moon. Okay, I just get on a plane, I go do it. So ubiquitous connectivity is going to be the first one. We're not going to worry about whether or not it's from space or if it's on the ground, if it's fiber, etc. For us, maybe that means we're less important. I don't know, but it seems like if you see the most expensive, the most valuable companies in the world, they're not space companies, right? They're application providers, oil and gas or energy. They're in other markets. So that's the first one. I think the other one is understanding if, when, what this metaverse and virtual reality and those sorts of things get into. And that kind of does tie in a little bit to this third issue, which is autonomy. Especially when we think, or when I think about mobile connectivity, I'm thinking about a ship or a plane or a car. And if those things are autonomous, what impacts on the network do those have in terms of latency and reporting back their decisions for safety of life kind of issues? And if that's the world that we're going to operate in 30 years from now, if like I'm just going to get in my car and it's going to drive itself, what is the robustness that the network needs to bring to the table to unlock that conversation? And can satellite, I'm sure it will, but what role will satellite be playing in that kind of autonomous future? And then, again, the virtual reality kind of solves that problem too, right? Of low latency, ubiquitous, high bandwidth, and all that other kind of stuff. But I think the first one is the S in MUSA probably won't exist anymore, right? Or maybe it'll just be space. It's just, oh yeah, that's, of course it was. Like, why would we not use space?
Yeah. The United Universe.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's just this network of networks, right? Now we're just, I kind of joke with a lot of people because, like I said, I cover the global space economy, and we always have this exercise of what's in scope and what's out of scope. And you go, okay, so when does soda sales on the moon become in scope for our global space economy, right? And you say that, but it's this, well, if we're talking about soda sales, we've solved a lot of these other challenges that we probably don't even appreciate we've solved. We've built a lot of markets, we've built a lot of ancillary services to have a vending machine on the moon, right?
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting time. The next 30 years will be, even more interesting.
Absolutely. Well, as these things come to pass, we'll have to have you join us again and tell us more about how it all came to happen and what's coming next.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully I'll be on the moon drinking a soda so we can talk about it.
I hope so. Thank you so much for being here today, Brad. We really appreciate it. If someone wanted to learn more about NSR, what would they do?
So you can go to our website, nsr.com. So we have a 3-letter domain. You send me an email, or you can email our info@nsr.com and check us out. We're on social media. We're really active on LinkedIn, Twitter, and those sorts of things. So reach out, engage with us. We're super excited to hear from you and learn more about what you and your companies are doing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I do want to take a moment to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. You can learn more about the MSUA at msua.org, and you can learn how to get our weekly newsletter, learn how to attend upcoming award ceremonies, learn how to join and become a member of the MSUA. So be sure to visit msua.org, and we'll see you next time on Game Changers Live.